The morning the police chief called me into his office, the sky hung low and colorless, like it was holding its breath. A thin winter rain tapped against the precinct windows, steady and patient, the kind that seeped into your bones without you noticing. I remember pausing at the entrance, shaking water from my jacket, telling myself it was just another day. Another report, another routine walk past the front desk where the radio crackled and the smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. Still, my stomach wouldn't settle. Chief Daniel Hargreaves wasn't the kind of man who summoned people without a reason. He was precise, controlled, the kind of authority that didn't need to raise its voice. Mid-40s, silver just beginning to edge his dark hair. A reputation so clean it made others nervous. To the city, he was a symbol, order, safety, the final word. To me, he was my boss. Nothing more. That's what I told myself. I walked down the hallway, my boots echoing too loudly on the linoleum. Doors passed by, interrogation rooms, offices, storage closets, each one familiar, each one suddenly feeling like a witness. When I reached his door, it was already open. "Come in," he said, without looking up. His office smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. The blinds were half open, letting in a dull gray light that flattened everything it touched. He finally raised his eyes, and for a second, something unreadable passed across his face. Not anger, not warmth, something else, something that made me stand a little straighter. "Close the door," he added. I did. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat, my hands clasped together, suddenly aware of my breathing. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, the silence stretched. I noticed small things, the way his fingers rested on the edge of the desk. The faint crease between his brows, like he was always on the verge of asking a question he didn't want answered. The blinds behind him stirred as he stood, and then, without a word, he turned and closed them completely. The room dimmed. My pulse jumped. Why close the blinds? I wondered. What could possibly need privacy like this? "You've been doing good work," he said finally, his voice low, measured. Too good, some might say. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I didn't. My mind raced ahead of my body, cataloging mistakes, late nights, moments I'd tried too hard not to be seen. Being seen had always been dangerous. In this job, in this city, in my life. He stepped closer, just enough to change the air between us. "There are things," he continued, "that don't belong in reports. Things that stay between people." My throat tightened. This wasn't about paperwork. I knew it then. I searched his face for clarity and found only tension, controlled, restrained, like a door held shut by force alone. And beneath it, something else. Curiosity, recognition, maybe even desire. Or maybe that was just what I feared. He stopped speaking, as if waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. I couldn't. As the rain intensified against the windows, one question echoed louder than all the others. What exactly had the police chief called me in here to confess, or to ask of me? On paper, everything looked the same. I showed up before dawn, logged my hours, chased leads that went nowhere, filed reports that said just enough and nothing more. The city kept breathing around me, buses groaning at corners, vendors shouting into the cold, the river carrying its dark secrets south. At home, my small rented house creaked and sighed the way it always had, like an old man adjusting in his sleep. The radiator clicked, the kettle screamed, rain came and went, but something had shifted. I felt it in the pauses. Chief Hargreaves stopped passing me in the hallway without looking. Now his gaze lingered, just long enough to be noticed, never long enough to be explained. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he didn't. Once, I caught him watching me from behind a glass partition, his reflection layered over mine, and for a heartbeat it felt like we were sharing the same body. I told myself it was paranoia. At night, I lay awake listening to the neighborhood settle. A dog barking 2 houses down. Tires hissing on wet pavement. Once, only once, I heard a sound from my backyard. A soft scrape, like shoes against concrete. I stood at the window, heart pounding, staring into darkness that gave nothing back. When I finally stepped outside, the air was empty and cold. No footprints. No explanation. At work, my name started appearing on assignments I hadn't requested. "Chief wants you on this," the sergeant said, sliding a thin folder across my desk. Sensitive. Sensitive was code for don't ask questions. The case involved internal theft. Evidence going missing. Nothing explosive yet, but the kind of quiet rot that spread if left alone. I worked it carefully, methodically, following trails that led uncomfortably close to people I knew. Each time I hit a wall, I wondered if this was what the chief meant by things that don't belong in reports. He called me into his office again 3 days later. This time, the blinds were already closed. "Sit," he said, and I obeyed before I realized I was doing it. He stood by the window, back to me, shoulders tense beneath his tailored jacket. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "You ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked. The question landed between us like a dropped glass. "All the time," I said, after a moment. He turned then, studying my face as if searching for something he might recognize. The silence grew thick. My palms dampened. I became acutely aware of how close he was, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "Good," he said finally. "Then you understand." Understand what? The words stayed locked behind my teeth. From that point on, our interactions became complicated. Brief conversations that carried too much weight. Instructions that felt more like tests. Once, while reviewing footage together late at night, our hands brushed reaching for the same file. The contact was accidental, fleeting, but the electricity it sent through me was anything but. I pulled away first. "Careful," I told myself. "This is dangerous. Not just because he was my boss. Not just because of his position. But because of the way he looked at me when he thought no one else could see. Like I was a question he'd been trying not to ask his entire life." The guilt came in waves. I'd spent years mastering the art of restraint, lowering my voice, straightening my posture, choosing my words with surgical precision. Desire was something you folded neatly and stored away, especially in a place like this. Especially under a man like him. And yet, one evening, as the precinct emptied out, he stopped by my desk. "Walk with me," he said. It wasn't a request. We moved through the building together, footsteps echoing. Outside, the air was sharp, the sky bruised purple with approaching night. We didn't talk until we reached his car. "You trust me?" he asked, hand resting on the door. The question felt loaded. "Dangerous. I want to," I replied. He watched me closely, as if weighing the cost of whatever came next. Then he nodded and drove. We didn't go to his house. We didn't go anywhere familiar. The streets grew quieter, narrower, until we stopped near an old park closed for renovations. No lights, no people, just the wind threading through bare branches. We sat there, engine ticking as it cooled. "This stays here," he said. "Whatever is said, whatever isn't." My chest tightened. "What are we doing?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "There are parts of me," he said slowly, "that don't fit the image people have. Parts that could ruin everything if they were seen." I swallowed hard. The confession hovered, incomplete, but heavy enough to bend the air. "You're not alone," I said, before I could stop myself. He turned to me then, really turned, and the look in his eyes stripped away every defense I'd built. Fear, longing, relief, all tangled together. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then a sound cut through the stillness. A knock, sharp, deliberate, on the driver's side window. We both froze. My heart slammed against my ribs as he rolled the window down an inch. A uniformed officer stood there, face shadowed. "Chief," the officer said. "Didn't expect to see you out here." The moment shattered. Masks snapped back into place. Just clearing my head, Hargreaves replied evenly. "Everything all right?" "Yes, sir." The officer glanced at me, curiosity flickering. Didn't mean to interrupt. As the officer walked away, the silence returned, changed, fragile. Hargreaves started the car. "We shouldn't do this again," he said. I nodded, though every part of me resisted. But boundaries, once crossed, have a way of leaving marks. After that night, the tension sharpened. His messages became more frequent, short, coded. Need you. Come by. Now. Each time, I wrestled with myself before responding. Each time, I went. At home, I noticed small disturbances. A chair slightly out of place. A window I didn't remember opening. Once, an envelope with no return address slipped under my door, empty except for a single typed line. Be careful who you trust. I showed it to no one. At work, the internal theft case took a darker turn. Evidence pointed towards someone high-ranking. Someone with access. Someone who knew how to erase traces. The closer I got, the more uneasy Hargreaves became. He asked questions that felt less like guidance and more like surveillance. You're sure about this angle? He asked one night. Yes. He held my gaze, searching. Good. Then stop digging. The order stunned me. That's not how this works, I said quietly. A muscle in his jaw twitched. It is if I say it is. For the first time, anger flared beneath the attraction. What are you protecting? I asked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You. The word echoed. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but approaching. I realized then that whatever was happening between us wasn't just personal. It was dangerous, entangled with power, secrets, and something neither of us fully understood. As I left his office that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both standing on the edge of something irreversible. And somewhere in the darkness, watching, waiting, someone else knew it too. The night everything broke open arrived without ceremony. It began with a call, no greeting, no explanation. Just my name, spoken softly, and an address I didn't recognize. The line went dead before I could ask a question. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment afterward, phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Outside, wind worried the trees, branches scraping the siding like fingernails. I should have stayed home. Instead, I grabbed my coat and drove. The address led me to a municipal building long slated for demolition, its windows dark, its brick face scarred by time. The parking lot was empty except for one car. His. Headlights off. Engine cooling in small metallic ticks. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paint. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I climbed the stairs. Each landing felt like a decision I could still undo. Turn back, I told myself. You don't have to do this. But my body kept moving, pulled by something that felt older than reason. He was waiting in a former records room, a single lamp casting a cone of light over a metal table. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked tired, exposed. You came, he said. You called, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. For a moment, neither of us moved. The distance between us hummed, charged. Outside, a door somewhere slammed, sending a shudder through the building. They know, he said abruptly. My stomach dropped. Who? Internal affairs. The theft. The missing evidence. He ran a hand through his hair. They're circling. The words rearranged everything. The warning envelope. The order to stop digging. The looks that lingered too long. Pieces snapped together with a soundless click. You lied to me, I said. He didn't deny it. I protected you. You used me. His jaw tightened. I kept you out of it. By pulling me deeper. Silence stretched, brittle. I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the man who'd built his life on control now weighing what he could afford to lose. My chest burned with anger and something worse, disappointment. I didn't plan this, he said. Not the way it happened. Not you. Then what did you plan? I asked. He stepped closer. The lamp threw shadows across his face, carving it into angles I didn't recognize. I planned to survive. The honesty hurt more than any lie. I turned away, pacing. The room seemed to close in, walls leaning. You put me in an impossible position. I know. Do you? I faced him again. Because you still haven't asked what I want. His breath hitched. What do you want? The question hung between us, dangerous. I thought of the years I'd spent hiding. Of the way his attention had felt like sunlight after a long winter. Of the cost. I want this to stop, I said. All of it. He nodded slowly, as if he'd expected the answer. Then you should leave. I moved toward the door. My hand hovered over the handle. Behind me, I felt his presence like heat at my back. There's something you should know, he said quietly. I turned. They'll come for you anyway. My heart pounded. Why? Because you're the cleanest link. He swallowed. And because someone wants me gone. The admission cracked something open. Fear flooded in, sharp and cold. Who? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. You can't protect everyone, I said. I can try. The old impulse surged, the urge to step closer, to close the gap, to pretend this was just two men caught in something forbidden and not a web of consequences tightening by the second. He reached out, stopping just short of touching me, his hand suspended like he was afraid of what contact would do. I never meant to want you, he said. But I do. The confession landed with a weight that stole my breath. Want, spoken aloud, stripped of authority and uniform, was something raw and human. It would have been easier if he'd stayed cold. Want isn't enough, I said, even as my body betrayed me, leaning in. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the tension held in his mouth. The world narrowed to the space between us. Say the word, he murmured, and I'll let you walk out. I searched myself for certainty and found only a tangle of desire and dread. The lamp flickered. Somewhere below, a car passed, its headlights briefly slicing through a crack in the boarded window. I can't, I whispered. The word felt like a failure. He closed his eyes, a muscle jumping in his cheek. For a heartbeat, I thought he might pull me in. Instead, he stepped back, hands fisting at his sides. Then listen to me, he said. They're moving fast. You need to be careful. Trust no one, not even you. His gaze met mine, steady and sad. Especially not me. The sound of approaching footsteps drifted up the stairwell. Voices. A radio crackle. The moment shattered, urgency flooding in. They're here, I said. He nodded once, already putting the mask back on. Go. Now. I hesitated at the door, every instinct screaming. This isn't over. No. He agreed. It isn't. As I slipped into the darkness of the stairwell, my heart hammering, I felt the weight of what had passed between us settle like a bruise. Desire had collided with truth, and neither had emerged unscathed. Behind me, the door closed softly. I didn't know then whether he would be standing there when the lights came on, or if I'd ever see him again. All I knew was that whatever line we'd crossed could never be uncrossed, and the fallout was only beginning. The days after that night were a haze of muted alarms and unanswered questions. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed too loudly, each flicker a reminder that nothing felt normal anymore. I kept my eyes on my paperwork, but the numbers blurred. Reports became meaningless. Every step down the hall, every casual nod from a colleague, reminded me that I was part of a game I didn't understand, and maybe didn't want to. Chief Hargreaves didn't summon me again, at least not openly. But I felt him in the silence of the office. In the way his name lingered on every memo I read. In the files marked sensitive that somehow always found their way to my desk. Each time I opened them, my hands trembled, partly from adrenaline, partly from something else, an anticipation I hated myself for feeling. One evening, I stayed late, alone in the dimmed precinct. The rain had returned, tapping insistently against the windows, and I imagined it like a warning. I'd buried my feelings as deep as I could, but when the office door clicked shut behind me, my chest tightened. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, waiting. Then I heard it, a soft knock, almost hesitant. My heartbeat jumped. Come in, I called, trying to steady my voice, though it sounded foreign in the empty room. He was there, leaning casually against the doorway. Dark coat, loosened tie. The light from the desk lamp caught his eyes in a way that made me look away instantly, as though staring could betray me. You shouldn't be here, I said. I couldn't stay away, he replied. The words were quiet but deliberate, as if testing the air between us. The space seemed charged, every detail magnified. The slight rise and fall of his chest. The faint smell of cedar and cologne that I'd come to recognize. The way his fingers drummed lightly on the edge of the doorframe. Every inch of him drew my attention against my will, and I hated that I noticed. I thought, after, the other night, I began, hesitating, we agreed. He tilted his head, expression unreadable. We agreed to be careful. Not to pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. Careful, I whispered. The word felt bitter on my tongue. Because careful had never meant safe. It had meant restraint. And restraint was a luxury neither of us could afford anymore. He stepped closer, slowly, measured, and yet, each movement carried intent. My chest tightened. I felt my pulse thundering in my ears, my hands suddenly too aware of the cold metal of the desk between us. You feel it too, don't you? His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through every rational thought. The tension, the desire. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to claim professionalism, duty, the world outside these four walls. But the heat in my body betrayed me. Every glance, every movement of his hand, every half step closer seemed to strip me bare. I can't, I stammered. He paused, just short of closing the distance. His eyes searched mine, intense, almost pleading. Then why do you stay? I didn't answer. I wanted to. I wanted to confess everything. The longing, the fear, the thrill of danger, but words faltered, choked by guilt. By the knowledge that we were teetering on the edge of something forbidden, something taboo, and crossing it could destroy everything. For a long moment, we stood there, the air thick, breaths shallow. His presence was a gravity I couldn't escape. My rational mind screamed at me to step back, to retreat to safety. My heart, and something deeper, whispered to step closer, to risk it all. Then, a sound from the hall, a faint echo, almost imperceptible, like someone, or something, was moving. Our heads snapped toward it, instantaneously alert, the spell broken. We didn't speak. The tension didn't dissipate, it merely shifted. Now it was edged with fear, with the looming possibility of exposure. The room felt smaller, suffocating, and yet impossibly intimate. Finally, he stepped back, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. Go home, he said softly. We can't do this, not here. Not like this. I nodded, swallowing hard, every part of me resisting. He turned away, his silhouette framed in the dim light, every movement deliberate. I watched him, heart hammering, as he disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. I remained seated, trembling, my fingers brushing over the edge of the desk. The room was quiet again, but nothing felt the same. Desire, fear, guilt, they mingled into a cocktail I couldn't swallow or discard. And somewhere in the distance, outside the precinct, the rain continued, tapping insistently, like a warning or a reminder that boundaries, once tested, rarely hold. As I finally gathered my things and stepped into the night, I realized that what had passed between us, even unspoken, had changed everything. There was no clear path forward. Only tension, only anticipation, only questions that had no answers yet. And the most dangerous question of all lingered in my chest: would we ever be able to stop wanting each other, even if it could destroy us both? At the precinct, everything functioned as if nothing had changed, but every glance, every casual remark carried a weight I could feel pressing on my chest. Chief Hargreaves moved through the office with the same practiced authority, yet there was a subtle shift, something in the way his eyes lingered on me a fraction too long, a shadow of unspoken words hiding behind his calm exterior. I avoided him when I could, ducked into reports, buried myself in paperwork, pretending the tremor in my hands and the heat rising to my face weren't signs of the night still clinging to us. Yet, in quiet moments, I could feel him behind me, watching. The knowledge was both thrilling and dangerous, like holding a live wire in my chest. We spoke less now. When we did, our conversations were clipped, professional, carefully measured. Yet beneath the surface, an undercurrent ran like a river of tension, electric, undeniable. Every word unsaid seemed heavier than any spoken one. I found myself questioning everything. Was he testing me, protecting me, or was this something else entirely, something I wasn't ready to face? I caught myself staring at his office door longer than necessary, heart quickening at the thought of his presence, imagining the conversation that could happen if the blinds were closed, if the lights dimmed. One evening, I stayed late, alone with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant echoes of traffic. My phone buzzed, no name, just a message: be careful. They're watching. I didn't know who sent it. I didn't want to know. But the words crawled under my skin. My thoughts immediately went to him. Did he send it? Was it someone else? The uncertainty twisted inside me, making me feel more exposed than I had ever been. Later, in the dimly lit stairwell, I saw him. He was leaning against the railing, coat half off, gaze distant. For a moment, I thought he might step toward me, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and disappeared into the shadows. The encounter left me hollow, craving something I wasn't allowed to name. Desire tangled with fear, and guilt became a constant companion. I realized the line we'd crossed, or almost crossed, had changed everything. There was no turning back. No pretending. The dynamic between us had shifted, suspended in a precarious balance of attraction and danger. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep came fitfully. The city hummed outside my window, indifferent. And a single thought refused to leave me: when the walls close in, and they come for him, will I be ready? Will I stand by him, or will I run? The question had no answer, only a heartbeat of anticipation, a promise of reckoning yet to come. And somewhere, deep down, I knew it wasn't just the city or the case that was dangerous, it was us. The blinds were closed again, somewhere. And I could only wonder what happened behind them. The call came just as the rain began, a soft, insistent tapping against the window that made the whole apartment feel smaller. I had been sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of case files, the aroma of cold coffee curling around me like a warning. My hands trembled slightly, though I tried to ignore it, pretending it was just the chill. The voice on the other end was calm, familiar, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Come to my office, now." It was Chief Hargreaves. His tone was flat, professional, but underneath it, I felt the weight of something else. Something unspoken. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the phone, heart hammering. I should have argued. I should have waited until morning. But the compulsion to obey, to move, was stronger than logic. By the time I arrived at the precinct, the sky had darkened into a bruised gray, and rain streaked the streets in long, uneven lines. My boots clicked on the wet pavement, the sound amplified by the silence around me. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, a low white hum that felt almost predatory. He was waiting, not at his desk, not in the usual authoritative pose behind the glass. He was standing by the window, one hand brushing over the blinds, eyes fixed on the storm outside. His silhouette was half-shadowed, the light catching the silver at his temples, making him look both older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen. "Sit," he said without looking at me. I obeyed immediately. My pulse thudded in my ears, loud enough that I was sure he could hear it. The office smelled faintly of cedar, of old paper, and something else, something sharp, like cologne mixed with tension. He finally turned, and the moment his eyes met mine, a strange heat ran through me. Not attraction. Not exactly. Something more dangerous, something forbidden. "Close the blinds," he instructed. I did. The room darkened, the pale light from outside now only a thin, gray slice along the edges of the blinds. It felt like a warning. Or maybe an invitation. I couldn't tell. "Sit closer," he said. His voice had dropped, carrying a weight I couldn't name. I remained where I was, hands clasped tightly in my lap. My mind raced, cataloging every rule I had ever followed, every boundary I had sworn never to cross. Yet the closer I stayed to him, the more aware I became of his presence, the subtle way his fingers tapped on the desk, the quiet tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze lingered longer than it should have. "You've been doing better than expected," he said finally. His tone was flat, but there was a trace of something underneath, curiosity, maybe. Recognition. Desire, perhaps. I swallowed. Words failed me. The storm outside intensified, rain drumming against the glass in a chaotic rhythm. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. I couldn't tell if it was the city calling, or my own heart. Then he leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving mine. "There are things," he said softly, almost like a confession, "that aren't in the reports. Things. Between people." My stomach knotted. I didn't answer, and in that silence, I realized I had no choice but to listen. And wait. What exactly had the police chief called me in here to say, or to ask of me? The blinds were closed. The room was dark, and the air between us carried a tension I could feel in every nerve.